Hello and welcome to Talk Julia. My name is David Amos.
And my name is Randy Davila.
Randy, it's been a little while since we've put out an episode, so I'm excited to actually sit down and record this and get back into it.
Yeah, it's been too long.
Yeah, I think we'll get back on a regular cadence here. But I'm excited for this particular episode because we're joined by a very special guest. Valentin, welcome to Talk Julia.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Valentin Churavy. I moonlight as a JuliaCon organizer, and my day-to-day job is being a PhD student at MIT, where I do research on and with Julia.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, right at the birthplace of Julia, right?
Yes.
So, Valentin, tell us a little bit about how you got into computers and into programming. What sparked that interest for you?
So I grew up in Germany, and I think I was always my family had a family computer, and I have two older sisters, and they got, when they turned, I think 16 or something like that, they got a new personal computer for themselves, and I got stuck with a family computer over the years, and so I had this old, very crappy machine that didn't run anything particularly well. And so at some point I decided I want to put Linux on it, and I spent a good couple of years distro hopping, going as deep as Gentoo and Slackware, and trying to rebuild the entire universe over like 72 hours. So I started using Linux and then LaTeX for math homework and stuff like that. And really into programming, I think I got through really fixing problems, like having software that didn't quite work well for me, and then going in and being like, oh, I think I can read this, I can try to understand, and I can try to fix what is going wrong. And then in high school, we also started having like proper programming classes, and I was very technology affine, I would say. And then university happened. I started my undergrad, and really that was when I started writing software more than I just like mucked about with software.
Yeah.
What was your undergrad degree in?
Oh, I did cognitive science, so I focused on neuroinformatics, a little bit of robotics, computer science, and philosophy of mind.
That's awesome. I love to hear that.
Yeah, it's a kind of, we sometimes joke that Julia was written mostly by scientists who needed better tools, and by very few computer scientists.
Yeah. What was your first programming language? Do you remember?
Bash.
Yeah.
But no, I think really like the first programming besides the, I would say Java, and then Scala.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So you did your bachelor's in cognitive science. Is that what you said? Cognitive science?
Cognition.
And now you're working on a PhD. And what's the topic for your PhD? Do you have one yet, or how far along are you on all of that?
How long until you finish?
How long till I finish? Hopefully within the next year or two. Depending on how much JuliaCon is going to happen. But no, I'm doing my PhD in computer science now. I switched degrees twice, actually. And I'm now working on accelerated and distributed computing.
Okay.
I would say. And a little bit compiler design comes in, language design questions, but primarily I work on GPU accelerated computing. And then the original topic I set out and still want to solve is distributed computing in Julia, but GPUs have a little bit distracted me over the last years from that. And I help. A lot of my work is helping scientists use Julia better, or I listen to their complaints and then try to think about the ways we could make Julia better for them.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I just looked you up on Google Scholar, and you have quite a few preprints and publications out for not having finished your PhD yet. It's pretty impressive. If these are all you, I'm pretty sure these are you that I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, that's because it's a very collaborative effort, right? And a lot of the work I have been doing is in collaboration with other people. And so, depending on how much work I do, right, I end up on those papers as well. And over the last 2 years, one of the most fruitful collaborations has been around this automatic differentiation tool enzyme that William Moses, a fellow PhD at MIT, kicked off. And that now has been really one of the core focuses over the last few years, making that work well for Julia.
So how much of your background in cognition do you get to use in your PhD? And it sounds like, I mean, trying to make Julia better for people, there's maybe some intersection there.
Yeah, so there are different approaches to programming language design, right? There is a very strong cadre around formal design that goes out of wants to formalize programming, wants to make programming more stable, like Rust is one of these approaches where you would say by introducing a new concept, a new limitation, actually, right? It's often all about what limitations do we pose on programmers. You're enabling the system to give guarantees to the programmer, and it makes it easier, or not easier necessarily, but safer, easier to use that system to write programs. And so Rust, Haskell, all of these kinds of things. I think Julia in general approaches from a different perspective. For me, programming language design is applied psychology. We want users to communicate with each other in the same language. And I think that's actually one of the more powerful concepts, is when you see a very diverse engineering and science team coming together. You have the domain scientists who want to express their problem easily. Or then you have performance engineers or HPC engineers who want to get the maximum performance out of the system. And classically, you end up these days with a split between the front end, the science level layer written in Python, and then the performance layer, the one that does all of the hard work, written in something like C and C++. Right. And for me, the power of Julia comes out of the ability to actually collaborate across the stack. Being able to, write very expressive high-level programs where the user doesn't need to worry about low-level system details, and then being able to take these programs and specialize them onto the particular hardware platform they're going to run on to extract performance.
Yeah.
And so that's where this applied psychology is coming from, because in some ways, programming languages are tools that we use to communicate with a computer, but code is read more often than it is written.
Yeah.
So it's also a way to communicate with other people, and writing down code and writing down ideas in code is, like, Alan Edelman, my professor at MIT, often says, like, code is math, math is code, because you can express the mathematical ideas in code very cleanly. And same goes for more broader concepts, in my experience.
Yeah, there is this interesting aspect to programming where you're writing something for two very different audiences that both have to be able to interpret and understand it. And that's always been kind of a fascinating component of it to me. Which also I think makes it difficult. Like, that's one of the difficulties, right?
It's often that when you sit down and you write code and you just want to get the best performance, you might actually write code that is really hard to understand. And so for me, the big, like, philosophical or almost research question is, can we write easy and high-level code, easy to understand and high-level code, where the intention is clear, that still performs good?
Yeah.
So this is a very mathematical concept, by the way. Like, just this idea of simplicity in the code that's also intentional and useful. It reminds me of, like, posing a mathematical problem. Like, no one pays attention to it unless it's simple to read and understand. and also at the same time is meaningful to the field. So it's an interesting little notion, I guess.
I think often in physics and mathematics, people strive for simplicity, right? There is this notion of elegance, and I mean, the reality of the real world is problems are not elegant.
Yeah.
Edge cases are, I think, very hard to handle correctly in most programming languages. Right, and this is always right. There's always tension here between elegance and easy to read to high performance and actually does what it needs to do. And so there was this project where at some point the comment was, well, I see that Julia is fast, but only when you write it like Fortran. And that was basically right because the program that they translated from to Julia was written in Fortran, and they showed, hey, it's as fast as the Fortran program. And everybody was like, great, but it still looks like Fortran. And so a colleague and friend of me and I sat down for a couple of weeks and we like thought through the program and we're like, okay, so how can we rewrite this so that we highlight the mathematical concepts at play here while not losing any performance? So what abstractions do we need to build, and can we make those abstractions zero cost or near zero cost?
Yeah. What was the outcome of that experiment?
So there were two outcomes that I found amusing. One of them was that we made compile time much, much worse, but runtime much better. So we taxed the compiler a lot in order to build these kinds of zero-cost abstractions and then still make them work on the GPU. And I think that's, in some ways, that's a second issue people can run into, that code is very, like, you can make code work very well on the CPU and things are fine, but the GPU is a different environment and it has harsher restrictions. You can't use dynamic dispatch because we need to resolve all of the static calls. And so you must be much more rigorous in your abstraction design in order to enable it to also work on the GPU. And so there was really that trade-off of, yeah, this is lovely, but now the compilation time, so I think we had like a runtime budget of 10 minutes that we set ourselves. That was interesting. And it was like, I don't know, roughly like 8 minutes of compile time and 2 minutes of runtime, whereas the other one had 1 minute of compile time and 9 minutes of runtime.
Interesting. He just flipped it on its head.
And it's great because, right, if you just want more compute afterwards, it's all good. You get that much more faster. But and we didn't have the same level of caching at the that we now have in the GPU stack, as an example. The second outcome was that I no longer understood the code that people were writing with this abstraction, because now they are writing fluid equations as they would be on a mathematical paper. And I was like, well, beforehand I could see the memory operations and the arithmetic operations, but now I just see Greek symbols. So actually it was, for me, less helpful. But for the mathematicians, it was like, oh, yeah, totally. I can see each of the equation terms as I would expect them.
And I dislike that. I'm a mathematician. My PhD is in math, but like, there's something like, this is a good example of ideas that are hidden by the symbols, right? Like a lot of people without math backgrounds, they'll look at these equations and they get like nervous about looking at them.
Yes.
Like at least like from an educator's point of view, they look, and really like the equation is like describing an idea, right? But all of the symbols that were chosen to be put in place were for like, they were needed for necessity to like simplify this long idea. But when writing code for that people are going to read, I would say I would prefer to not use those symbols, even though they're there and we can use them in Julia, for example. But like, I don't know, David, do you get what I'm saying? Or
I just think it really depends. Like, I don't see an issue especially if like you're a single person or maybe a small group of people that are working on a project and you're all kind of in the know with everything, then there's a significant maybe productivity boost you get from being able to just write things the way you would maybe write them on a chalkboard or see them in the papers that you're looking at or things like that.
Yeah.
But I think, the wider the audience gets, the more you have to kind of rein that in.
And I think that there are two notions here. One of them is actually the notion of building an abstraction and making it useful. And then the second layer is terseness, right? Mathematical symbols give you a layer of terseness to express your ideas, and that can be beneficial or detrimental, depending on your audience. But building abstractions to express concepts instead of everybody having to write down like the 7-layer for loops that would be necessary to do the operation every time they want to do it, right? That is very much like the core of, for me, programming is to take a problem, break it down into constituent problems, encapsulate those in helpers and utilities, and then build abstractions based on them so that afterwards I can hide the complexity, right? We do the same complexity hiding that mathematicians do, but we call them libraries.
Right, yeah.
And we need to document those libraries well. And I think that's my biggest struggle with the math symbols is sometimes you have different traditions. Like, right, in science, one of the biggest problems is communication across fields because terminology is fluid. Terminology is field specific. And so you need to be able to learn and understand what somebody means when they say, don't have a good example at the top of my head, but like, right, it takes students years to take up all of the lingo in their specific domain. And then once you start using the lingo, you gain efficiency because you can now express your ideas much more tersely. But if you want to communicate with a layperson or an expert in a different subject matter, you need to translate.
And it's not just across fields or like disciplines. It can be within sub-disciplines of the same field. So, yeah.
Yeah, one of the biggest things in philosophy is actually just like going back and making sure that everybody agrees with the definition of the terms you're using.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, you're having a conversation and you might think you're all in agreement, but two people, you walked away with like two very different understandings of what just happened. Speaking of hiding complexity, you were one of the volunteers for JuliaCon.
Yes.
I'm sure there was a lot of complexity that was hidden behind all of that.
It is really fascinating to think about organizing and especially this kind of volunteer work. Right, the goals you set in the beginning can be quite high and lofty and all-encompassing. And then people have limited amount of time. People have been volunteering for many years. Right, in some ways, I think I've been involved with organizing JuliaCon now since 2017.
Okay.
And so seeing those changes and then myself having to do some changes. So the first 2 or 3 years of my organization, of being part of the organization team, I was program chair. And I started to feel like that was too much work. I could not sustain that level of involvement while also doing all of the other things I wanted to do with my day. And so I stepped back and I decided I wanted to focus on one problem and specifically that we hadn't solved before. And that was proceedings. I wanted to be able to publish, to allow junior scientists to publish their work that they presented at JuliaCon as short papers, and make sure that those that they are actually deposited correctly, so that they are that the academic credit works. Yeah, so I've been focusing on I focused on proceedings for I think 3 years, and then now this year I was executive co-chair.
Okay.
So the other chair was Avik, who has been involved with JuliaCon, I think almost longer than I have. And I think the biggest challenge in this day and age is digital versus in person.
Yeah, for sure.
And actually making that decision months in advance whether or not we're going to be in person or remote is, I think, one of the most challenging aspects that we have had to do. And so right this year we were conservative and we said, no, we're going to do another year of virtual, and next year, hopefully, if everything goes well, we will be in person again.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that though, because while I haven't going to any in-person conferences over the last couple of years, but I know I've seen conferences that have planned to be in person, and then as soon as maybe even like a week ahead of it, they're canceling it or moving it to all online or something like that, and that's got to be extremely frustrating for everyone involved, probably not just the people that are going to attend. But I think making that decision early was good because maybe we could have had it in person, maybe not, but at least what to expect, and everyone just gets to stay focused on that.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So I think we've been always trying to record all of the talks happening at JuliaCon, and then a few years we tried to make sure that we always live stream them as well. Live streaming talks is challenging, but and really requires a good AV team in the background. And then, but it's always interesting to see the engagement level, and you see so many people were in the room, but then on the live stream, you had double, triple, quadruple the amount of people. So for some ways, we did feel like going virtual would actually be a better engagement with that large portion of the community that couldn't attend in person. And I think, making conferences accessible is a real problem.
I have a feeling that the in-person JuliaCon, when it happens, there's going to be a lot of people.
We currently don't have no idea how we are even going to estimate how many people are going to show up. And of course that is problematic because we need to size our space requests, etc., for an estimate. This is one of the reasons why we tend to go with academic institutions, because they cost a lot less.
Yeah.
And that cost factor gives you flexibility, right? This is also one of the other problems that I think a lot of conferences were facing. If you are a large conference and you booked a conference venue, that's a huge cost that you will have a very hard time offsetting.
Yeah, I don't know how you even estimate that. Just send a survey to everyone that signed up.
People don't fill out surveys.
Yeah, I know. The engagement for that stuff is so low, it's probably not even representative. That's tough. Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll be a good number. I could see, there's a lot of excitement of like, oh, finally it's in person again. But then you're back to having the same sort of accessibility issues that you get with having an in-person conference. Like, not everyone can afford the travel and the lodging.
It can be a lot of money, right? That's always something to keep in mind. And for previous in-person JuliaCons, we always try to find some sponsor who would allow diversity funding, so that we could fund students and underrepresented people to attend the conference, despite not having maybe the independent funding somebody else might have. And that does help, but it's only a small percentage.
Sure.
Engagement during the online conference worked kind of well. It could be better, it could be worse. Right, we had a lot of people watching. We had less than that engaging, and then even less than showing up to the social hours. And I think, the social hours, for me, one of the key aspects of JuliaCon is not necessarily all of the talks that are being produced, but that's, of course, a key part. But for me personally, like, the most interesting aspect is the social interaction that randomly happen outside the talks in the hallways, right? The hallway track.
Those are the best.
Right. That is the reason why we go to conferences. The reason why we give talks is so that somebody else pays for us going to conferences.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and to have material to post on YouTube later.
I remember talking to a few of the LVM developer meetings organizers, and they joked that they decided to make such a meeting because it is easier to convince an engineer to give a half-an-hour talk about their work than have them write a page of documentation.
Yeah. So going back to the social hour, that was the first time I'd ever done anything like that in an online conference. So I went to the online PyCon in 2020, I think, or 2021. I can't remember which one. And they had something kind of similar to you were using this this Gather Town or Gather service that was neat. It was like almost like a little video game or something. You go in and walk around, you had a little avatar, and there were things to do in there. But and the one at the PyCon conference was more like you were presented with what looked like tables, and you could go sit at a table. You just click on like a chair, and you go, and then you're in a video chat with the people at that table. And in both cases, it was nice because it did kind of facilitate that random hallway track social interactions that you get at in-person conferences. But I think one of the challenges with it is that it's like now the conference is like distributed across a bunch of different platforms, and it's not this like cohesive experience where you're just all there together. So that that's just a challenging thing to solve.
One of the best conferences I attended during staying at home was entirely hosted on GatherTown.
Yeah, okay.
So there was literally a virtual room in which you would go, and the talks would be happening on a screen in front of you. You can then maximize it and watch it at your leisure, but you would also be in like a 5 people, 6 people group. And so if you had some friends around, you could actually chat without disturbing anybody else while everybody was having the same videos being clicked.
Interesting.
I think Discord in some ways works better for the asynchronous aspects.
Yeah.
And I think this will be something we will be trying to replicate, is to take questions from the online audience. And maybe normally you have like 2 microphones in the room. People go up to those microphones and ask questions. And instead of doing that, I think we're planning on having a moderator who takes questions on a similar platform like this year and then interacts with the speaker, which takes away some of the like awkwardness of putting yourself into a room, asking your questions, and also facilitates the online interactions.
I've been to conferences that do the Q&A after the talks, like the live Q&A, and some that just don't do the live Q&A, and it's like, no, just go meet that person afterwards if you want to talk to them. And I gotta say, in some ways I appreciate the not having kind of the live Q&A like at the in-person conference, just because, well, as a speaker, you're already stressed out as it is, and you're just you get done with your talk, you're probably like, just okay, I just want to go like sit in the fetal position for like 15 minutes and until
yes, all of the adrenaline is rushing out.
Yeah.
Stress, absolutely.
And and then the other thing is, well, I guess they usually record the live Q&As if they're also like live streaming or they're recording. They get recorded, so they are kind of there for posterity. But I like the idea of having this asynchronous Q&A where you can post your questions like during the talk, and then at some later point, the author or the speaker can come back and answer that and have time to maybe, actually formulate a good response and not something they have to sort of just pull off the top of their head.
Yeah, I think I haven't found a good tool to facilitate like the actual fully asynchronous experience. I find tools that are like doing the online integration, all of that works kind of well. But yeah, I mean, that's I think it's interesting to look back and think about what's different about a virtual conference, and there's actually a lot more infrastructure work necessary from the organizers.
I bet. Yeah.
Like in a physical conference, yes, we need to organize the venue, we need to organize lanyards and sign in and volunteers for that. We need to hire an AV camp, audio video production company to do the live streaming. People have questions about travel. All of those things are complicated, but in the end, people bring their laptop, plug them in, give their talk, and that's it. Whereas for the virtual conference, you need to like do a whole pre-processing of all of the video uploads. And over the last 2 years, that has worked sometimes decently, sometimes not so good. This year, I made a mistake, and some of the audio was way too quiet. And some of those we caught early enough, but we didn't actually have enough time to review every single video we uploaded. So we asked the submitters to help. Like the speakers themselves got an email, but apparently 50% of that email ended up in a spam folder. Right, and it's like all of that communication can go amiss. People don't read their emails. And so the response rate to that was kind of meh. One of the other things we've been trying to do for several years now and always been struggling with, and it's a lot of work, is getting decent subtitles made before the video goes live. This year we tried some auto-transcription service and then allowing the speakers to edit it and then upload it. But that is still more work than, right, it's... Yeah. There's no good way of doing it as far as I can tell. And the infrastructure to actually make the management of all of that information doable is one of the biggest bottlenecks. Like if I feel like I would do a startup, that's the product I would sell. And I feel like there are companies who are selling that product, but it's always bad. Or not as great as it could be, or not as customizable as it needs to be.
Yeah, it's in fact, I was just watching a video today for work that was like a Zoom video that had been recorded earlier. I needed to go check it out, and I was watching it on the Zoom platform, and it had their real-time transcription of it. It was absolutely horrible, and in some cases was even including like words that are not like offensive words that were not what the speaker actually said, but what it understood, and it was including it, and it was like, holy cow, like. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done on all that, and I know that that's a struggle because we've been uploading videos to YouTube, and that's still something we just haven't really sorted out for ourselves. Even is having good transcripts. We're just relying kind of on the YouTube service to do it for us, and it's really subpar. And it's one of those situations where I'm not sure that having something is necessarily better than nothing.
Yeah, we had this pre-generated output, and we decided to use it as a starting point for the authors, and I think it helped some.
Yeah, because
they didn't need to sit down and write everything down from scratch. They had a blueprint to work off, but we decided not to actually automatically add it to all of the YouTube's videos because it was such poor quality, and we rather make it clear that it's an auto-generated transcription from Google than make it seem like it's something human created of really poor quality.
Just while we're on the topic of subtitles, though, one thing that was really interesting to me. So I went to this conference a few years ago now called PyCascade, the Python conference they kind of rotate around like Vancouver and Seattle. They had someone doing the subtitles in real time, like live at the in-person conference. They were sitting down at a table, and they were just, like a stenographer or something, like just typing away like really fast. And it was absolutely brilliant. Like, I mean, they obviously were extremely good at what they did, but I'm sure services like that are costly.
So there's one conference in Germany that I attend on a semi-regular basis, the Chaos Communication Congress, and they are completely volunteer run. They have, I think I guess the attendee number is somewhere in the thousands to 10,000. And they do all of the video production, all of the transcription, everything, video translation, volunteer driven.
Yeah.
But they also have a community who delights in that, who is excited about doing that, and of course there's some bonus thing. It's like a little bit gamified, but generally speaking, they do live production with transcription and translation for most of the talks. So you can speak in English as a speaker. I think they don't do necessarily. They might do English to German, and then German to English, and French to English and German. That's normally, I think, what they offer.
And it's in real time?
Yes,
That's amazing.
I think the translation is in real time, at least. The transcription is a post-hoc effort, I think. And they have a website you can go to, and if you have a couple of hours to kill, you can just add transcription after transcription. But they have a really complicated workflow, and I actually looked at and was considering standing that up just for us. But there's also a cost trade-off. It's just having to adopt technology that was not necessary. Okay, now I need to have the same input data. How do I manage that? That's all complication. So this year we used a hacked together system based on Julia scripts, downloading and uploading information to web services, some global master table on the web hosted by Airtable, and then basically some scripts that get the information, put it up to YouTube, put it there, do this, do that. And yeah. Doing the video processing on the Julia continuous integration systems. So somebody uploaded a video, somebody then put that link into the table, and then that automatically kicked off a build job that would download that video, add our little pre-roll, do some video processing, and then upload that to YouTube and the transcription service, and so forth.
That's cool. I mean, at least there was some, automation going on there behind the scenes.
Yeah, and then the year before that, there was a lot of that was done manually.
Yeah, which is probably why it was automated this year. We're like, okay, let's not do that again.
Yeah. I'm a lazy person. That's why I'm a programmer. And so if I can automate something, I will automate it.
So I'm curious what some of your big takeaways were from this year's JuliaCon. Just, and I guess you can interpret that broadly, from an organizer's perspective, or just from, I assume you didn't have a whole lot of time to really watch a lot of the talks, as the conference was taking place. But
my dirty secret is that I haven't watched a JuliaCon talk voluntarily without having to quality control or something like that.
Yeah.
All of that doesn't count. I think there were maybe 2 talks that I managed to watch this year. And then last year, it's I try to find when I'm flying, I download some JuliaCon talks and watch them months later. But I think the biggest takeaway, or the biggest challenge, is how do we go behind our current audience? So if you looked at the watch numbers, etc., participation numbers, they were all kind of similar to last year. Maybe even a little bit less. And that's not necessarily problematic, right? You don't need to have year-over-year growth that is in the N%, but it is for me indicative to the fact that we have a core audience that attends the conference, and we might not be doing as good of a job advertising and attracting new people. And that goes from also speaker pool.
Speaking of the speaker pool, I forget who it was that I think it was Miguel Roz that showed me the chart he made of when all the actual submissions came in, and it's everyone's day of that is due, or maybe even a day or two after the due date of getting all that in. I would venture to guess that that's not specific to the Julia community. That's probably a typical thing across conferences.
It is a typical thing. I think it's actually more common for academic conferences to be like that.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we have multiple challenges, right? One challenge is we are running out of space. We do not have enough slots for how many submissions we are getting. I remember one conference year where we did not do a submission extension. We closed the submission on time, and I got inundated with emails asking me to reopen the submissions because how could it possibly be that there is no extension?
We've only been reminding you for months.
I've been reminding you for months, and we had 240, 300 submissions. It's we had enough.
Okay, yeah.
We were not staffed. We didn't have the feeling that we needed to extend it, and then we extended it and we doubled.
Yeah.
And so reviewing is really hard. Choosing the talks that we can support. We will see that a lot of the talks we accept are lightning talks. Some of them were not submitted as lightning talks; they were submitted as full talks. And basically, in order to make enough space in the program for everybody to present, or for as many people as possible, and to highlight and show the diversity of the Julia community. That's my goal, right? Is we need to go back to people and say, sorry, I think your topic is great, your talk could be great, but do you think you can do this in a 10-minute slot? Or we go back to people and say, hey, would love to have you, but the only thing we can offer you at this time is a poster. Right? Things that are better multiplexed. And I think posters in an online realm are always problematic, but at least they turn into a 3-minute YouTube video that somebody can watch.
Right, yeah.
I mean, we don't have many options. We can make the conference longer, but making a conference longer is going to make it more expensive, harder to attend for other people. We can make more tracks. More tracks will dilute the attention that exists and increases the likelihood that somebody will speak in front of an empty room.
Yeah, which I have seen happen at conferences.
And so in-person conference scheduling for me is a lot about making sure that talks that I know will have an outside interest, like the State of Julia talk every year has the highest attendance quota, we will put those into a single track because nobody needs to compete against that.
It's just interesting to think that, humans have been congregating in these kinds of large meetings like this to share information and research for a really long time. And yet there's still so many challenges and difficulties with that that it seems like it's just a really difficult problem.
I think it's the problem of there is no ideal solution, right? And so the only thing you can do is trade-offs.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a common trait in many design problems. If you want to choose your garbage collection algorithm, well, you're going to choose that depending on the problems you see people using your language for. And that trade-off might not be the right one for a different group of people.
Well, despite all the challenges, I still think that you and the rest of the organization team pulled off another great conference, and there were a lot of really cool talks this year, as there are every year. But this is the first time I actually got to attend and like actually. Like in the past, it's always just been watching the YouTube videos, and I had one day where I could actually come, and I actually, got to watch some stuff in real time and interact in Discord and all that, and it was a lot of fun. So I thought, you're welcome to take a pass on this, Valentin, but I thought if you want to, but I thought we'd just maybe in the last few minutes here, just mention, kind of go around and say what our favorite, maybe not our favorite, but one of the talks that really stood out to us that we enjoyed from the conference this year. So I'm happy to start. So hopefully I don't take yours, Randy, but one that I really enjoyed, there's some things I'm really looking forward to, was the updates on the VS Code extension.
Ah, that's the one.
Is that the one?
Yeah.
I really like what they've got, coming, planned and everything. And just to kind of quickly highlight, and we'll link to the, the video for this and everything, so that people can go and check it out. But two things that stood out to me that I thought were really cool. One is they now support execution of Julia code blocks in just regular Markdown documents. So if you have a little, and then maybe they've supported that for a while, but it was all announced in this talk of things they've done. And then one thing that's upcoming that looks really nice is this new test runner that they are working on, where you get more granular control over running tests. You can run your entire suite, and then you can go back and just run, the ones that failed, rerun them once you've, put some little patch or something in there. So, and I know they said that it's still brittle right now, and that it'll probably be several months before that's available, but I'm looking forward to that.
I think one of the ones that are my favorite is also a David Antoff video, the Julia op installer and Julia version manager. And I've been aware that it existed, but that was really what kicked me in the butt, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this on my day-to-day development system, and it's been really nice. So Julia op allows you to choose and select which Julia version you are going to run. And it automatically downloads and installs it. And on Linux, which we've been having this problem over the many years that distributions like to muck with our build scripts and then break things and then get confused when people complain about those things being broken. So Julia op just uses the binaries we put a lot of energy into building correctly. And you can also add development versions and other random tags. I can have be like, okay, this is a feature I'm trying out, and I can easily switch between which version of Julia I'm going to run. The other one, I think, for me, it is very exciting to see is just the amount of talks that came out of the Julia Lab and were presented. It's like I looked at it and was like, oh yeah, right. We have a lot of master students and undergrad researchers who then presented their work at JuliaCon. And the other thing I would like to highlight were all of the mini symposia. And we talked a little bit about challenges earlier, and mini symposia are really a way for me how I think we would solve some of those challenges, especially the space constraint. Giving people space to organize their own mini conference within JuliaCon.
Miguel's REPL workshop. Yeah, if I had to pick another one, that would be my second favorite.
Definitely a good one. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we mentioned that too. Miguel was a previous guest on the here on the podcast. He was our very first guest, actually, the first time we ever had a guest. Or no, sorry, that was Logan.
Yeah, it was Logan.
And then we had Miguel come and also talk a little bit about the REPL. And then I know he did a course or seminar series at UNAM in Mexico, and then turned that into this Julia REPL mastery workshop. So definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, both of them, both Logan and Miguel, have been involved with organizing JuliaCon over the last few years. Been doing tremendous amount of work.
Yeah, and I know Miguel's done a lot of work in just getting Spanish speaking folks involved in Julia and JuliaCon and all that, and so that's good to see. Bring in some more of the diversity and get that other language speakers feel represented and comfortable at the kind of the main Julia conference.
This was one of the things we were like, probably the last virtual conference, so we're gonna give this a go, and we intentionally opened up a call for non-English talks and workshops. And so one of the workshops, as an example, was in Hebrew.
Oh, awesome!
It was a repeat of last year's Julia Statistics workshop, but this year it was in Hebrew. And so that kind of language diversity, I think, is really important. You can do it in an online format much easier than you can do it in person.
Well, I think we've been talking for about almost an hour now, so I think we can call it a day and wrap this up.
We're forgetting the question though.
Do you wanna ask them, Brandy?
So there's two questions that we like to ask. So first, what is your favorite Julia package? And then second, what's your favorite IDE? What's your IDE of choice to work in?
Everyone makes the exact same face you just made, though. Whenever we ask, what's your favorite Julia package? They're always,
okay, so the second question is actually easy to answer. I use primarily Visual Studio Code with the Vim bindings, and then I use Vim. But I'm not a Vim plugin fanatic. So the only thing I have is, I think, syntax highlighting, and it's my go-to editor for remote systems, and when I need it in a pinch, and I'm used to it so much that the key bindings make sense. And so in VS Code, the editor for me is still Vim, but all of the extra features are really nice to have. And I think I really switched to Visual Studio Code when their remote editing features became so robust. It's been really, really great, and makes things a lot easier. What's my favorite Julia package? Oh boy. Can I give a ranking? Or can I give a set of 5 without any ordering?
Yeah, sure.
Benchmark tools. Cthulhu, which is kind of problematic because it's my own package. LVM.gl /GPU compiler.gl. What do I do? JSON 3 by Jacob. It's been really nice to work with, and it makes me forget that I need to deal with annoying JSON. What? Oh, and Maki.
Do you ever use Revise?
I mean, Revise for me is not a package. It's a lifestyle.
Right. Yeah.
And it's one of those funny things. Like, it would almost be natural for us to make Revise a standard library, but standard libraries are where code goes to die.
Yeah, exactly.
People, right? The maintenance. I mean, sometimes maintenance also doesn't pick up once we move the code out. But maintenance on standard library code is a lot lower than, or like the rate of change, which is good, right? In some ways, the stability of a standard library is great. But we also see much less feature development because people would like to use the feature immediately, not wait 6 months for Julia release to come out. And so hopefully eventually we'll get to the point where we can swap out, where we don't need to have a standard library baked into the system image, and we can actually swap out implementations or update standard libraries alongside normal packages. And then standard libraries are only packages that are somewhat maintained by this nebulous cloud that is the Julia contributors, but doesn't have any other specialty with them.
Well, Valentin, thank you so much for joining us today and chatting with us.
It was a pleasure.
Absolutely appreciate it. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you around and hopefully catching you in person at the next in-person JuliaCon.
And then also we should just have another interview at some point after you finish your PhD.
I will hold you to that. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.